Gaetano Pesce, an Italian architect, and sometimes I like to begin the presentation in this with a fragment, the way the picture downloads first on the page of PowerPoint. And it's a rather artistical depiction of this architect. Of course, he has special eyeglasses because architects usually do this almost by definition. But he is an interesting man. He is an interesting man and an interesting architect and an interesting designer. And I will try to articulate why I think so, besides what we will read here. So Gaetano Pesce, born November 8th in 1939, he's still alive. He is today 61 plus 82 years old. Happy birthday, Gaetano Pesce. Is an Italian architect and the design pioneer of the 20th century. Mr. Pesce, this text is from Wikipedia, was born in La Spezia in 1939 and grew up in Padua and Florence. During his 50-year career, Mr. Pesce has worked as an architect, urban planner, and industrial designer. His outlook is considered broad and humanistic, and his work is characterized by an inventive use of color and materials, asserting connections between the individual and society through art, architecture, and design to reappraise mid-20th century modern life. He studied architecture at the University of Venice with such notable teachers as Carlo Scarpa and Ernesto Rogers. Now, as we know, Carlo Scarpa, who didn't have even the right to teach because he was not considered an architect because he didn't pass the examinations of the board of architects, whatever, in Italy. So that's why he always taught the interior architecture at the University of Venice. I'm talking about one of the most important architects of the 20th century. But bureaucracy, Carlo Scarpa had to work with some other architects who signed for him because he couldn't sign, because he didn't have the so-called legal right. Again, I'm talking about Carlo Scarpa, one of the most important architects of the 20th century. The struggle between art and bureaucracy goes on, and art should not give in. It is unacceptable what bureaucracy does. To condemn an architect of the stature and the magnitude of Carlos Scarpa to these humiliations is unacceptable. Anyway, it happened in a sophisticated country and cultured country like Italy. Between 1958 and 1963, Mr. Pesce participated, a very polite author of this writing, which I took from Wikipedia, participated in Group N, an early collective concerned with programmed art patterned after the Bauhaus. Since the 1960s, Gaetano Pesce has been known to relate art to the design of interiors, products, and architecture. The New York Times critic Herbert Mouchon, whom I know personally, and he even was in my house at one time, and unfortunately he died, I think, of complications related to AIDS, described Mr. Pesce as the architectural equivalent of a brainstorm. Well, it's kind of true. During his career that spans 4 decades with commissions in architecture, urban planning, interior, exhibition, and industrial design, Gaetano Pesce, the architect and designer, has conceived public and private projects in the United States, Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Well, you notice the word projects because he didn't build a lot. But his projects are very provocative. And in my opinion, indeed, they are brainstorming. Maybe they are even heartstorming. And I think they could stir up the imagination of everyone who is willing to learn from him. In all his work, he expresses his guiding principle that modernism is less a style than a method for interpreting the present and hinting at the future in which individuality is preserved and celebrated. I would agree. Modernism is not a style, and it should not be called a style. Sorry, Patrick Schumacher. He taught architecture at the Institut d'Architecture d'études urbaines in Strasbourg in France for 28 years, at the Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, at the Domus Academy in Milan, at the Polytechnic of Hong Kong, at the Architectural School of Sao Paulo, and at the Cooper Union in New York City, where he has made his home since 1980, after living in Venice, London, Helsinki, and Paris. And now let's look at some drawings. Self-portrait, industrial schemes, 1983, polychrome urethane. So we are dealing here with a complex creative individual, if I am to use a mainstream kind of expressing myself, and I'm not proud of it, who continuously broke the frontiers between art, design, and architecture. And I think he had a so-called dark side, and I think his so-called dark side could be very fruitful to contemplate and to try to understand. I think this kind of cultural presence is very important, because he did indeed, I think Herbert Milchamp was right. It is some kind of a continuous brainstorming in his works. And how are you to bring to the fore new ways of seeing and being in the world if you don't stir up the dark regions of your imagination? Omaggio a tutte le Madonne del mondo. Well, quite a flattering name or title from 2016. Maybe he had troubles with ladies, and he wouldn't be the first man in the world, of course. Even Napoleon said the only victory in front of a woman is to run away. And I'm talking about Bonaparte, Napoleon, who died exactly 200 years ago. Well, not exactly, but 200 years ago, yes, in 1821. What did he want to say here, actually, Gaetano Pesce? I guess what he wants to say is that woman for man is an eternal unknown. And the clothing is more known than what is covered by the clothing. Interesting work, also interesting in terms of how it is done, the materiality. You see, it's not a painting. It has a three-dimensionality. Look at the man who holds it. I don't know if that's him, probably not. Anyway, so, he's interesting, not just about what he says through his art, but also through how he says it, through what materials he uses. Transparency, 2016. Obviously, he was struggling, like many of us, between spirituality and sensuality. First of all, on the cross, it's not a man, it's a woman. And, a woman depicted, in a certain way. So, yes, he's a modern man in the 20th century, now in the 21st century. He has the same challenges that humans always had. On one hand, an aspiration towards spirit, and on the other hand, basic, not modern needs, basic desires. Again, a work which is not to be hanged on the wall, it seems. This is also interesting because he makes apparently a bidimensional work, but which is meant to be held, from behind, and not to be hanged on a wall. This is also interesting. And on the other hand, yes, there is a certain, but this is also part of the time he worked in, and that is the 20th century or the beginning of the 21st century, where iconography was liberated by all kinds of movements and all kinds of attitudes. So the silhouette here on the cross, this kind of silhouette would not have been possible, some centuries ago. No, this belongs to our time. And it's fine that it belongs to our time. After all, that's when he made it. Donna con titolo, a detail from 2016. Again, Donna. And you also see that Gaetano Pesce tried to break away from the linear or expectable relationship between the frame and the canvas. Here, he underlines, in fact, the distance between the frame and let's call it the canvas, which is, I think, a good thing. Senza titolo, Donna, again, 2016, and the same method, but you see, it's sophisticated, and it's an elaboration here. This is not done in any way. It's done his way, and he wanted it to be this way. Again, I think Herbert Michon was right. He is brainstorming art and brainstorming architecture. I wish he built more, but he built a few things, and especially a building in Japan, which is quite interesting. Now, even this is very unusual, now to see a silhouette, a man or a woman, or it doesn't matter, behind the artwork, as if it is a sculpture or a statue, but it's not. It's a work which could have been, on a wall, but he doesn't want that. And I think for him, the visitor, the one who moves around the work, becomes part of the work somehow.
Dan, this looks like glass. Is it glass?
No, it's not glass. He uses, Batsal, he uses all kinds of plastics. I don't know how they are called, but it's not glass.
Because glass would not, it's not easy to cut glass this way, and it won't stay also this way.
Exactly.
It'll break.
Glass. No, he works with, I mentioned, I read at the beginning, I don't even know these materials. Maybe we'll come across again a description of, it's not glass. L'ospedale fa riflettere sul passato, 2016. He works with all kinds of materials, and he has a very interesting vision, if I am to call it so. I like the fact that he supports the artwork per se in this way, and he even shows he doesn't try to make every connection in the same way. You see here, these wires come out of the frame. It's okay, that they are part of the artwork. As an architect, he is also very, very provocative and very interesting. Too bad, but he is so interesting that he didn't build too much, but he built. We'll arrive there. Of course, he was, obsessed by Donna, by the lady, by its mystery. Leonardo diceva che in futuro, sorry, I don't know Italian, I better stop reading, from 2016. Is that man part of the artwork? He could be, and that man could be me or you or someone else, and could be, of course, a Donna. This is interesting, that it is a bidimensional work, more or less, and yet he didn't put it on the wall. He suspends it from the ceiling, and you can see it from behind as well. Yeah. So this is something about Leonardo diceva. I guess with some efforts we could imagine what he wanted to say. Anyway, I'm a little bit too agitated to try to translate. But yes, this is this architect and designer and plastic artist. And there is the title of the work, handwritten. Design. Let's look at some pieces of design. Indeterminazione elastica from 1965, metal, wood, and magnet. Can you believe it? I mean, yes, there are many artworks with metal or designs with wood, but what about the magnet? I don't know what it is. I only found this picture. Is it design? It is, but it's also an artwork. We don't know. Plaster, enamel, and iron. This is how he works with associating different materials that normally you would not think of associating. Plaster, enamel, and iron. Look at this. And this one, I would say, could very well function as a poster for advocating the cause of not smoking. That there is darkness in this image, of course there is. It's clear that Gaetano Pesce, we saw his picture at the beginning. This is not a man, who only knew the angelic side of life. Now look at this, vacuum compressed ABC. I don't know what ABC is, ABS. I guess some kind of a material. And again, the blood is a clear indication that this man knew something about pain, about suffering, about the less pleasant parts of life. And art. Flexible polyurethane foam from 1969. Gaetano Pesce. Not too many architects would do something like this, but he did and does. We have the insinuation of a flower, but we also have the blood coming out of his nose. So there. Light alloy, iron, ABS, and glass, the Moloch lamp, 1970. You see, they are called these designs, but they are also art. Look at the size of this lamp. It's like a desk lamp, but the size is giant. Interesting, because yes, by modifying the size of an object, you also modify its meanings and, important consequences derive from Hello, do you hear me? All of a sudden I saw that I am muted, but now I think you can hear me. Sorry. Omaggio alla verde età di consume, 1971. Wax, virgin wax, aluminum, wood, and hard polyurethane made from ground rigid integral. I don't know what this is, but look at this work. Indeed, we are dealing with brainstorming here, and we didn't yet see everything. Is that him? Is this a self-portrait? It's possible. Did he invent this seat, if we are to call it so? It's possible. Wood and rigid polyurethane from 1972. There was a time, many years ago when I was studying architecture, and I was thinking that Gaetano Pesce is not really a serious architect. It's because he is so unsettling, by crossing borders and conventions. And but I am beginning to, this happened some time ago, to have second thoughts about my evaluation at that time. Italy, the new domestic landscape, 1972. This is like a stage design, and quite interesting. I don't know if he did also the theater itself, or just the stage design, or the physical context in which these human beings are part of the work. One thing is for sure, Gaetano Pesce is not a conventional architect. He is an artist, essentially, an artist who does various things, theater, design, artworks, architecture, but they are, even his architecture is far from being too different from what you see here. That's why I think he's very. I think by studying his work, we free ourselves from so many conventions that we became accustomed to think that they are architecture. Golgotha suit, 1972. Look, it's a table, bricks of glass, foam, and polyester resin. Chair. The chair is made of fiberglass and polyester resin. Casina arca table, bricks of glass, foam, and the same polyester resin. And you know, it's some kind of a, you know, it's in part religious, but it's also, you know, ludic and secular at the same time. He designed a table. Maybe he choreographed also the movement of the people around. I don't know. He clearly liked to cross borders between arts. Look at these chairs. You don't even need a person to sit on this chair, because the person is actually the chair. The chair is the person, and the person is the chair. Look at the legs. And they're interesting, you know. You probably cannot sit on them, but you know, they make you think. A rag armchair, rags, a natural rubber. Look at this. Why not? And I would say it's quite sustainable. It's made of, you know, rags and some natural rubber. I think even Frank Gehry would have liked this, you know, voluptuous in a way, and I'm sure very comfortable armchair. Although there is always the shadow, the Jungian shadow, somehow you feel that Gaetano Pesce knew something or was expecting something from the dark regions of the soul. Le futur est peut-être passé. The future is perhaps old or past. Iron, bronze, cement, and lead. Look at this sculpture. This is not design. This is art. It's sculpture. It's not. And look at this. But he crossed borders continuously. He didn't make things to be used as designers usually do, just an object to be used in a certain way. That his objects refuse to be possessed in this way. Polyurethane foam, multi-plywood polyester quilting. Now this one, I guess, is more, it's almost bourgeois, but in an almost sarcastic way. And he also did, you know, various materials. I mean, the same thing in various materials, but also it's not mass produced. They are individual pieces. Here is a variation of that. Don't worry, we'll arrive at architecture soon. Portrait chair, 1984, semi-rigid polychrome urethane. And you see, again, sitting, a chair, an armchair, whatever, which doesn't need someone to sit on, because there is already someone, part of the chair is sitting. It's not that he's sitting there, but as you can see, the chair became a human being. Another armchair, wool felt impregnated with polyester resin, prototype, wool felt impregnated with, anyway. This is also interesting. It's more like a ceremonial chair. It's a throne. And look here, you know, there is someone there hiding within. Again, I like Gaetano Pesce because he doesn't give a damn, sorry for the non-academic way of expressing myself, for functionalism. You know, functionalism is so boring, you know, so predictable, so sterile, that we have to say a no to, once and for all, to functionalism, really. because there is no pleasure, there is no joy. Here, yes, you could say, okay, what's so great? But it's still a piece which, the chair becomes something else towards the top. It's almost like the collar of some kind of clothing. And it's, probably rather malleable. Look here, the chair becomes, more complex. It's adding wings, left and right. And I think his work is very interesting. San Sebastiano cabinet. So based on San Sebastian, fabric, epoxide, resin, wood, papier, mache, and brass. Yes, it's San Sebastian who was, victimized by arrows or nails, and this is what it is that we look at here. It's an abstract work, but with a reference to Saint Sebastian. And it even opens up. It has shelves within. Interesting piece. Again, goodbye functionalist, goodbye. Yes, you could say it's an irresponsible design or it's an irresponsible art. Yes, you could say that, but there is some beauty in that so-called irresponsibility. Seaweed chair from 1991. Look at it. From seaweed. Seaweed, recycled fabric, resin, and polyurethane. It's only a metaphor for the seaweed. Tree lamp, a tree lamp, yes. Why not? Nice. Nice. Why not? Why wouldn't we have a tree lamp as well? And you see, it emits light, actually. Now, architecture. Let's show some architecture by this strange artist. Casa Elastica, 1963, plexiglass, iron sheet, and brass, a model. Why it's called Elastica? I guess it was the, the mythology of, movable walls, partitions, and so on, which, he himself arrived at unavoidably, but visually, the model is interesting. I mean, I have seen models of, structures with movable partitions and so on. But here you can tell that the artistic side of Gaetano Pesce had the upper hand. Spazio quadridimensionale, 1965, also a model, because what can you do? A man like him obviously didn't easily receive commissions, but we are going to arrive at some built work. Yes, there is a connection with even with structuralism in a way, but he distorts things. He doesn't let them become easily easy systems. Restoration late romantic villa, Sorrento, in 1973. It's funambulesque architecture, really. I mean, this is not the common way of thinking and doing by an architect. You have here the romantic villa in Sorrento, and then he digs underneath the villa and makes a cave. But imagine we would have the same freedom that he displays. I think architecture would be turned upside down and would invent incredible things. Church of Solitude, 1974. In a way, it's the dissolution of the church representing the death of God. And look at the landscape design, so to speak. It's incredible. You know, I mean, imagine it was built in this way. It would have been very interesting, but it was not built. But as food for thought, I think Gaetano Pesce deserves attention. Is this God? Is this Christ? That there are remnants of the church? Just you know, is the church of solitude? The solitude is provoked by the death of God, and that's kind of what we look here at, or the death of Christ. Project for Les Halles, Paris, 1979. Interesting work, better than what was built in Paris. But what can we do? He tried. He wanted to win a competition also. And look, here is a typical landscape by Gaetano Pesce. Is this not the work where Tadao Ando just built something there that Aaron Betsky cried against, screamed against? Look at the model. I like these models by Gaetano Pesce. They are, you know, interesting. Don't quite know what's going on here, but they are interesting. Chicago Tribune, 1980. He obviously wanted very much to build. Let's see what he proposed. Now look at this. This was the second competition launched for Chicago Tribune. The first one where Adolf Loos sent his famous column, and then Walter Gropius sent the work, and other architects. But this, in the 80s, there was another competition, a new competition for the Chicago Tribune, and this is what Gaetano Pesce sent. Imagine that this building was built just as it is. I think it would have been very interesting. And it's possible to build something like this. We see here even a door, don't we? Yes, it's possible to build exactly how he proposed it. Unfortunately, of course, it was not built, but it was probably one of the most interesting submissions for this competition. But what if our buildings, what if some of our buildings would look like this? I think they would be very interesting, don't you think? Because there is also narration here. You know, he's trying to tell a story. I don't know exactly what story he's trying to tell, but you know, this wall, if I am to call it a wall, is stirring up my imagination, is asking questions to me. And this is not a little thing. Vertical,
Then is Chicago Tribune a newspaper?
yes.
Then I can explain it. Maybe it's like the year is something related to hearing hearing the news,
Yes.
and you see that crushed face, that is the some voice which is crushed, and the hands which are tied, like newspapers often are tied about not speaking the truth. Maybe things like this were expressed. I don't know.
Excellent interpretation, Batsal. Thank you very much. Yes, it is a narrative architecture, and I think Batsal is not far from truth. Thank you, Batsal, again. Vertical loft, 1982. Look at this. Can you believe it? And it could be built just as he designed it. But he was so unique and so idiosyncratic that he didn't build much. I'm surprised and happy that the Japanese commissioned him to build a big building, and you are going to see it. Harvard Shelter, 1985. This one he built for Harvard University. This is, I think, the School of Architecture at Harvard. And I don't know, I mean, he was brought down to earth, you know, like the Albatross by Baudelaire. You know, he built this structure, but it's more, you know, it's more moderate and more timid than the rest of the things he did. Maison des Enfants, the House of Children, 1986. I like very much this model, really. it's very nice, and I wish it was built just as we see it. It was not built, but it's an excellent model. It has color, it's playful, it's joyous. It has even a darkness because it has a part underground. And I don't know exactly what the function of this building was supposed to be, but I like the model. Project for a bank, even a bank, yes, 1988. Look at this. This would have been the most incredible bank ever built, but it was not built. And not for not being sufficiently tall, because you see, it was supposed to be very tall. But look what he did with these stairs. You know, these stairs become ornamental, and they create a, you know, a very interesting appearance for the building. Just try to imagine that this bank was built. It would have been probably the most dramatic and the most interesting, the most cultural, the most provocative bank ever built, but it was not built. I guess here is another, I don't know if for the same function or not. Sao Paulo Tower, 1988. Yes, it takes a crazy artist to imagine something like this, but he studied architecture. He was an architect, but an architect who didn't, you know, restrict himself to what he learned in school. So this made him famous, but with very, very little built work. This one also, I wish it was built, but it was not built. Also, the model looks like almost as if it was built. But if it was built, again, would have been one of the most unusual towers built. And now we arrive finally at a building he built for this Oguraya Yamamoto Inc. in Osaka, 1989. Osaka is the city of Tadawando. And look at this building. This is not a model. This was built. And this was built when? In 1989. He already placed, you know, vases, if I am to call them so, for vegetation on the wall. Something that is now 30 years later is done frequently to put vegetation on the wall, but in less, you know, ornamental or dramatic even way, because he opposes to the redness of the building the greenness of vegetation, of plants. And look, it's a good idea, you know, and it's very feasible. And in fact, he did it in Osaka. This building is probably one of the most original buildings in a city blessed with a lot of good architecture and interesting architecture, both modern and past. Osaka. So this is the last picture I show of Gaetano Pesce today.